Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. Hazeldale, Washington, late afternoon, November 26, 2019. Parents inch forward in the pickup lane at Sarah J. Anderson Elementary. A parked minivan sits slightly off axis to the traffic flow. In a burst of impact, tempered glass fractures, a windshield webs, and a routine dismissal becomes a crime scene before anyone processes what they're seeing. Within minutes, the school's calm is replaced by protocols and tape. This case centers on Tiffany Hill, a mother of three, who had done what safety plans prescribe: report, document, and seek protection. The lot is crowded. The facts have to be separated from panic quickly. We're going to walk the first hour with the discipline of a case file, timestamps, actions, custody, because in domestic violence homicides, speed and sequence often determine what can be proved later. 3:15 p.m. Approx. Multiple witnesses register the initial volley. Drivers behind the minivan describe a sharp sequence, glass and a dull crack more than the cinematic bang. Inside the vehicle, Tiffany in the driver's position, a family member in the front passenger seat, children in the rear. From the start, responders identify one priority: stop the threat, then triage. Within minutes, calls stack to 911. Dispatchers keep callers on the line long enough to confirm location and whether the shooter remains present. The guidance to callers is precise. Stay low, don't cluster at windows, keep lanes clear for emergency access. A school administrator executes lockdown procedures on adjacent classrooms even though the shots occurred in the lot, not the school building. 3:18 to 3:20 p.m. First units arrive, moving past idling cars to the minivan. Officers verify that the primary danger has left the immediate area and direct medics forward. A quick look establishes what will later be diagrammed. Penetration to the front windshield and driver's door. The vehicle is stationary. The driver's seating position is consistent with being struck while stopped. The front passenger, an adult family member, shows injury consistent with being inside the cone of fire but not directly targeted. The children are uninjured and rapidly shielded by responders. Negative evidence noted and logged once here. There are no student or staff injuries on campus during the initial sweep. 3:21 to 3:24 p.m. A bolo goes out with a make, color, and direction of travel pulled from on-scene statements and a quick canvass of the exit lanes. One patrol unit breaks from the perimeter to follow the reported vector. Another secures the minivan as the primary scene. Officers begin a perimeter that is as much about evidence control as safety, keeping the lot from becoming trampled by well-meaning parents who want to help. 3:25 to 3:30 p.m. Medical triage continues. Medics work the front passenger and confirm the physiological status of each child for documentation and later witness protection protocols. Meanwhile, command assigns roles: a scene log officer, an evidence technician, and a liaison to school administration so the lockdown can be scaled without compromising the scene. The primary scene is declared the parking lot around the minivan. Any activity related to a fleeing vehicle is processed separately to prevent a dual scene discovery narrative. 3:31 to 3:36 p.m. Forensics begins with what can be done without altering the vehicle. Exterior photographs, the glass field mapped before wind or foot traffic migrate fragments. Traffic cones mark visible casings. An officer stands over a cluster of laminated glass spall, which will later help determine angles of impact. No one touches the door handles or interior latches. This preserves latent opportunities and avoids inadvertent changes to lock positions. A senior deputy dictates the first skeletal timeline into a recorder: initial call receipt time, unit arrival, medical clearance windows. These times will anchor later filings. 3:37 to 3:45 p.m. A second team coordinates with patrol units away from the campus. The pursuit, brief and already contained, is treated as a processing location distinct from the school. That is a deliberate choice. One homicide scene, one discovery point. The endpoint is not reframed as a second scene of the crime. It's a location for vehicle stop data, not for redescribing what happened at the school. Back at the lot, a detective begins a focused witness triage: drivers directly adjacent to the minivan, staff who were outside, any adult who saw approach or departure. The tone is clinical. Names and contact routing are captured. Extended statements are deferred to a controlled setting to avoid contamination by group retelling. The school's internal cameras and any external business cams facing the lot line up on a list for immediate preservation requests. 3:46 to 4:05 p.m. The minivan is tented as the November light shifts. Photogrammetry markers go down. A decision point is logged. No door is to be opened until a comprehensive exterior set is complete. Medics clear the children for transport to a non-public location where guardianship can be handled without cameras. An officer escorts a school official to brief waiting parents with a narrow statement that confirms safety without jeopardizing the investigation. The entire operation remains inside a single factual lane, one scene, one victim of record, and a set of artifacts that will later align with autopsy and digital records. If you're following along as a viewer, here's the detail that matters most this early: the geometry of the vehicle and the speed of the lockdown. In domestic violence homicides that erupt in public, chaos is the enemy of proof. Here, the perimeter forms fast and the chain of custody starts clean. That will limit arguments later about contamination or altered positions. We pause the first hour here with the narrative intact: a school parking lot, a targeted burst of gunfire, a fleeing vehicle, and a fast-moving response that treats the homicide as a single, contained scene. The next phase moves under fluorescent light, where procedure replaces adrenaline. With the parking lot stabilized and logged, the investigation moves indoors, where procedure replaces adrenaline. The transfer begins at the curb. A detective reads the seal numbers off the body bag for the scene log, while a technician records video of every handoff. The stretcher is loaded, then escorted by an officer whose only job is to ensure that from this moment forward, nothing about the chain of custody can be questioned. Names, badge numbers, timestamps, each line added now will support or sink courtroom reliability later, and everyone in the hallway knows it. Intake at the county medical examiner's facility is quiet and deliberate. The decedent is identified as Tiffany Hill, mother of 3, the same person removed from the driver's position of the minivan at Sarah Jane Anderson Elementary in Hazeldale, Washington. Documentation is immediate: overall photographs, close-ups of visible injuries, and a full clothing inventory with each garment dried, packaged, and labeled. Technicians swab the hands for possible trace and bag them in paper, not plastic, to prevent moisture degradation. Fingernail scrapings are preserved. Jewelry, if any, is logged separately. A property receipt cross-references the scene case number so that evidence does not multiply across parallel systems. The autopsy room is clinical, not cinematic. The pathologist announces the case number, date, and participants on an audio track before the first incision. According to standard practice and contemporaneous media descriptions of the case posture, the working expectation is multiple gunshot wounds with manner, homicide. The task here is to turn that expectation into a confirmed sequence, one injury at a time, staying within what the body can actually prove. External examination comes first. The pathologist notes wound locations consistent with rounds that entered through the front plane of the vehicle and the driver's side door. When bullets pass through laminated safety glass, they often leave telltale micro-spall and altered edge characteristics on clothing and skin. Technicians document any such features. The absence or presence of soot and stippling is carefully recorded. Because an intermediate barrier, windshield, likely sat between muzzle and target, close-range soot on skin may be limited or absent, a point documented as a working observation, not a conclusion about distance. Clothing tells part of the story. The driver's torso garment and outer layers are photographed on grids that will later align with vehicle trajectory mapping. Any glass fragments retained in fabric are lifted with tape cards and secured. The pathologist directs that recovered fragments be preserved for comparison with the minivan's windshield composition. A small but important decision is made here. Maintain strict separation between items listed as physical, confirmed, e.g. projectiles, specific glass fragments with lab confirmation, and physical, working, e.g. apparent microspall pending microscopy. That vocabulary discipline prevents overclaiming in early reports. Internal examination follows. The pathologist traces wound paths through soft tissue and bone, documenting entry, possible fragmentation, and exit, if present. Each projectile or fragment is recovered into a labeled evidence cup, photographed in situ and sealed. The order of recovery matters. The first round recovered gets its own evidence designation and a unique seal. Mixing is fatal to credibility. Trajectories are sketched and later digitized so they can be overlaid with the vehicle's angle of impact chart from the lot. That alignment, body path to metal and glass, often resolves whether rounds came in shallow through door or steeper through windshield, and in what order. Toxicology samples are drawn as a matter of routine, not suspicion. Their value is defensive. Toxicology that shows nothing clinically significant can prevent future attempts to cloud the narrative with unrelated claims. Blood typing is recorded. However, absent official reporting, no speculative blood loss estimates are offered. This is a homicide confirmation, not theater. Ballistics management is one of the chapter's critical steps. Each projectile cup is sealed with tamper tape that bridges from plastic to paper label. The label carries the case number, item number, date, and initials of the person sealing it. The pathologist dictates a summary: number of projectiles recovered, general caliber class if visually apparent, no premature caliber claims, and which anatomical structures were damaged. A detective witnesses the sealing process and signs the chain of custody. These are the details juries remember when defense counsel suggests contamination. These are also the places honest cases have been hurt when agencies cut corners. Here, they don't. With external and internal documentation complete, the preliminary determinations are entered. Cause of death, multiple gunshot wounds. Manner, homicide. Preliminary is not a hedge. It's a legal safeguard that allows lab confirmations to catch up. The pathologist issues a working note that wound morphology is consistent with rounds passing through an intermediate barrier before striking the decedent. That will be tested against the vehicle's laminated glass profile and the distribution of glass inside the cabin. One layer feeds the next, none substitute for it. Before release from the autopsy suite, the technician verifies that all evidence items are accounted for: clothing bundles, swabs, fingernail scrapings, projectile cups, trace tape lifts, and documentation media. A custody officer signs for transport to the evidence warehouse and, where necessary, to the state crime lab. The timestamps close the loop that began at the curb in the school lot. If you care about convictions that withstand appeal, this dry paperwork is where resilience is built. There is a human layer that can be acknowledged without bending the file. A mother is dead, and 3 children were in the vehicle. In towns like Vancouver and Hazel Dell, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. But the morgue can't fix that. It can only produce facts that won't unravel 6 months from now. The body has spoken as far as science permits. Now the car must answer. The next step is to correlate wound paths and ballistic recoveries with the vehicle's angles, glass, and residue patterns. Without redescribing discovery, the school lot is locked down, the minivan sealed off from the chaos that followed the shooting. Investigators know the vehicle itself is the best witness now. Its placement is slightly off-axis in the pickup lane, a detail logged because trajectory depends on angles. Exterior photos come first: body panels, windshield fractures, driver's door perforations. Casings on the asphalt are measured against fixed points. A glass field at the base of the windshield is collected, each shard bagged to compare later with fragments lifted from the victim's clothing. Nothing is moved without a marker, a photo, and a line in the log. Opening the driver's door reveals laminated glass scattered across the seat and floorboard. Traces lifted on tape cards. Seat track positions are recorded for courtroom accuracy. Gunshot residue swabs are taken from the door frame and A-pillar. Interior locks and handles are documented exactly as found. Each step ties the vehicle back to the autopsy results. What the body showed is now matched with where the car absorbed damage. Trajectory rods confirm rounds entered through both the windshield and the driver's door. No secondary impacts are found on adjacent cars. Negative evidence that narrows the cone of fire to the minivan itself. Casings recovered nearby align with the observed entry points, but the sequence remains a lab determination, not a field assumption. Beyond the car, detectives secure nearby surveillance: a school camera and a business dome across the street. Both are preserved as digital, working evidence pending timestamp alignment with dispatch logs. Combined with carrier data, these records will track movements in and out of the lot. The lot is cleared once the tow truck arrives. Every detail, orientation, casings, locks, trajectory markers, has been captured for lab analysis. The car has spoken. Now digital records must confirm how and when it all came together. From the taped-off parking lot, the work shifts to clocks and cameras. Analysts start with what time can prove and what silence can suggest, aligning dispatch times with any image or signal that places vehicles on and off campus within minutes of the shooting. The school district preserves exterior feeds facing the pickup loop and exit lanes. A fixed camera at the crosswalk shows the minivan already stationary before the glass fractures, its angle slightly off the painted line. That single frame matters because it anchors trajectory work to a known position. A second camera at the staff lot doesn't capture the shooting, but it sees cars leaving in a narrow window immediately after. Footage is exported, hashed, and logged as digital, confirmed once the checksum matches on ingest. Where pixels blur, the team does not overpromise. Shape, direction, and time are recorded. Plate characters wait for other sources. Across the street, a business dome camera holds 36 hours of motion-activated video. Investigators secure it with a preservation letter first, then an evidence receipt. That camera gives a clean angle down the outbound lane. Within minutes of the shooting, a dark sedan exits at speed, threading past idling cars. The exact make is not discernible, but its path and time are. The frame timestamps are compared to the school system's time base, then to the sheriff's CAD log. Offsets are documented so counsel can reconstruct the math later. When clocks disagree, the report shows by how much and which source is the reference. Precision now avoids arguments later. Automatic license plate recognition on Hazeldale arterials is checked next. Clark County's system is limited, so investigators pair local hits with any state partner systems that archived reads from the same corridor that afternoon. Where a plate read matches a vehicle seen leaving the lot, the pair, ALPR time, camera time, gets flagged digital, working until carrier records support or narrow the path. The goal is not to chase everything, it's to build a consistent movement chain that can survive scrutiny. Carrier records are the backbone. With court authorization already in place from the earlier stalking case, analysts request historical call detail records and basic location information tight to the incident window, then step back across prior weeks to understand routines. It's 2019. Apps and GPS breadcrumbs are secondary to tower data and timing. The pattern that emerges is plain. Frequent contacts between numbers associated with the household end weeks earlier, then a dark interval. No protection order alert, no emergency call from the protected party between the late November release date and the afternoon of November 26th. Dark isn't proof of absence, it's an index of risk. When victims follow safety planning, silence can simply mean they were trying to live without drawing notice. Analysts map sector coverage for towers around the school and the outbound arterials. They avoid reading too much into a single sector change. Coverage overlaps and phones don't always pick the closest site. Instead, they look for a sequence. Sector A near the campus within minutes of the shooting, Sector B along the main exit, and Sector C on the approach to the pursuit endpoint announced over the radio. When the carrier's handoff pattern lines up with CAD times to the minute, it becomes digital, confirmed movement, not conjecture. Radio logs and AVL, automatic vehicle location, complete the pursuit reconstruction. Patrol units activating lights are logged automatically. Their breadcrumbs set the grid for the route taken away from the school. That route is kept as a processing location in reports, separate from the homicide scene, to avoid creating a second discovery narrative. Timing the AVL pings against camera exits and tower sectors closes any remaining gaps. What's important for viewers is the discipline. Movement is proved three ways: camera, carrier, and patrol telemetry, so that no single failure topples the sequence. Financial pulls are narrow by design. Investigators check for fuel purchases or cash withdrawals that place a known vehicle or card near the school corridor earlier in the day. A card hit at a nearby station an hour before dismissal is put in a holding pattern as digital, working until video confirms the plate. If it matches, it adds pre-incident presence to the timeline. If it doesn't, it's released from the file so the story stays clean. At this point, two realities can sit side by side without contradiction. Records show a high-risk domestic context with prior stalking indicators, and records also show administrative quiet in the 4 days before the homicide. No triggered alert, no new violation recorded. That tension is common in domestic violence crime. Paper protection is a tool, not a shield. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. By early evening, the network picture is stable. The minivan's position and damage are fixed in the lot. The outbound flow is captured on two independent cameras. Sector changes march down the road in step with patrol telemetry. And there's no credible evidence of a different route. The file moves into a posture where statements can be weighed against a timeline that's already hard-coded by systems no one controls. Next, detectives will sit down with family and officials whose decisions shape the weeks before November 26th, prosecutors who warned of extreme risk, advocates who assessed danger, and those who set and posted bail, to compare statements with what the cameras and carriers now lock into place. With cameras and carriers fixing movement to the minute, detectives turn to people who put words on the record. The goal is not to retell the parking lot shooting, but to compare what officials, advocates, and families said before November 26, 2019, with what the timeline and filings already prove. Prosecutors go first. In the weeks leading up to the homicide, they warned a judge that Tiffany Hill faced extreme risk according to court filings and contemporaneous media. They asked for $2 million in bail and monitoring after earlier arrests and a stalking charge tied to a magnet-mounted GPS tracker found under her vehicle. The warning is specific: escalating conduct, a no-contact order already in place, and a pattern that suggested surveillance. The court set bail at $250,000. That single decision becomes a reference point for everything that followed, but the interview is kept clinical. Why the lower figure? What conditions were imposed, and whether GPS notification technology was available or considered at the time. Advocates who worked with Tiffany describe safety planning that tracked the risk. They note school pickup concerns, changes in routine, and the need to minimize predictable patterns, details that align with the digital, confirmed camera positions and the dark interval between the defendant's late November release and the afternoon of the homicide. Their accounts are not used for drama. They are used to test whether warnings were clear and whether structural tools, monitoring, alerts, custody, were requested in time and with enough specificity. Where advocacy notes reference fear of being followed, detectives match that to the earlier tracker discovery and to any observed app deletion during prior contact with the suspect, as reported in police documents. Family interviews are handled with care. Statements about recent threats or surveillance are recorded and time-boxed, then compared against call detail and cell sector movement. If a family member recalls a car appearing near the home on certain evenings, analysts check for tower hits and ALPR reads on the relevant corridors. If the family describes attempts to vary routines, investigators look for corroboration in camera feeds near alternate pickup locations or different time windows. There is no fishing. Each statement maps to a testable artifact, or it is left as an account that cannot be proved or disproved. Detectives then speak with the judge's clerk and, when permitted, review the audio or minutes from the bail hearing. The purpose is narrow: capture the court's stated rationale. Was the lower bail tied to a statutory matrix, prior history scores, or a belief that conditions short of detention could manage risk? When the record shows prosecutors asked for $2 million and monitoring, but the court imposed $250,000 without GPS-linked victim alerts, that divergence is logged without editorializing. In domestic violence crime, the difference between a warning and an action is often measured in days. Law enforcement personnel who handled the earlier stalking arrest are interviewed next. Their reports mention the tracker located under Tiffany's vehicle and the observation, at a prior contact, of the suspect deleting an app from a phone, according to police reports. Detectives ask about the choice of charging, the speed of filings, and whether a risk assessment tool flagged lethality. If any tool scored the risk high, that score and date are entered as testimony confirmed once the document is located. If no tool was used, that absence is noted as negative evidence in the administrative sense. Nothing in the file elevated the risk beyond the prosecutor's oral warnings. The mid-case identity statement is made here for narrative clarity and accuracy. The person charged in the weeks before the homicide and later identified as the shooter is Keeland Hill, the estranged husband of Tiffany Hill. This identification is withheld until now to keep early chapters focused on forensics and timeline, but it has been supported throughout by filings and public reporting. The reveal is functional, not sensational, and it sets up two lines of comparison: what Keeland told officers or the court, and what carriers, cameras, and trace now establish. Statements attributed to Keeland in earlier contacts are compared to the artifact trail. If he minimized contact or denied following Tiffany, that claim is weighed against the tracker discovery and location of the device under her car. If he suggested compliance with the no-contact order, detectives checked the violation log and any documented presence near school corridors before dismissal on prior dates. Where he offered explanations for app deletion or for being seen in certain areas, those explanations are recorded and matched to sector coverage and ALPR reads. The standard here is simple. Statements either fit the pattern demonstrated by independent systems or they do not. A short segment is reserved for administrative interviews with jail staff and bonding agents. Investigators document exact times of release, any special conditions explained at the counter, and whether the defendant was fitted with monitoring hardware. If no monitoring was ordered, that fact is labeled confirmed from the court file rather than inferred. If any notification system could have alerted Tiffany to a proximity breach under existing law at the time, it is identified and dated. If not, that absence is logged without speculation. The chapter closes with a comparison table in narrative form, no graphics needed for voiceover. Prosecutor statements about grave danger line up with the working pattern of stalking documented weeks earlier. Defense or suspect statements that minimize risk collide with confirmed artifacts. Tracker recovery, camera times, sector handoffs, and the pursuit path. Family and advocate accounts of fear are supported by the digital record that shows presence in sensitive locations even when no protection order alert fired in the days before the homicide. The through line is tight. Warnings existed, authority acted, but not to the level requested. Systems captured movement that human memory alone could not. This isn't a search for hindsight. It's a record of what was known, who said it, and whether the actions taken match the evidence available at the time. In towns like Vancouver and Hazel Dell, the balance between a judge's discretion and a survivor's safety isn't an abstract debate. It's the difference between routine and crisis. Next, the file moves to procurement and planning. What tools were sought or acquired, what denials were recorded, and how timing relates to the confirmed time of death without inventing any detail the record doesn't support. Detectives traced what was bought, attempted, and denied in the weeks before the homicide. Court filings confirm that Keeland Hill tried to purchase a rifle earlier in November 2019. The sale was denied after a background check. That denial, logged with a NICS reference number, became part of the confirmed file. Investigators also documented the GPS tracker found under Tiffany's car weeks earlier. Retail subpoenas and surveillance tied its purchase to a narrow window before the stalking complaint. A deleted tracking app noted during police contact aligned with those events, entered as digital, working evidence of planning behavior. Financial polls showed fuel purchases placing his vehicle near Sarah J. Anderson Elementary before dismissal on November 26th. Jail paperwork confirmed his release days earlier without any GPS-linked victim alerts, an administrative gap now on record. Autopsy findings showed wounds consistent with handgun ammunition. That narrowed dealer subpoenas to ammo purchases and accessories since the rifle had been denied. Service records and ALPR hits confirmed his sedan's readiness and presence near the school loop. Together, these steps, failed gun purchase, tracker use, app deletion, bail release without monitoring, and routine transactions, formed a procurement timeline showing intent and preparation before the public crime. With movement and procurement mapped, the file turns to what the counts would have been and how agencies divided the work without redescribing the parking lot. Charging theory starts with elements, not emotion. According to police reports and contemporaneous media, first-degree murder fits, a protected party under a valid order, prior stalking conduct, and a public shooting during school pickup that demonstrates premeditation and extreme indifference. The firearm enhancement attaches by statute. The wounding of an additional adult in the vehicle elevates to attempted first-degree murder or first-degree assault with a firearm depending on the prosecutor's election. The same facts support felony violation of a court order and felony stalking based on the earlier tracker, with each count carrying domestic violence designations that affect sentencing ranges. Because investigators recovered projectiles consistent with a handgun, any possession status question would be charged only if confirmed by record. Absent that confirmation, it stays out of the information. Clean files win. Prosecutors build probable cause statements from what cannot be argued away. They lead with the order's existence and service date, the defendant's prior arrest and the earlier stalking charge, the denied rifle purchase documented by the dealer, the consumer tracker discovered under the victim's vehicle, and the aligned clocks, school camera, business dome, carrier sectors, and patrol telemetry that place the shooter on scene, fleeing within minutes of the gunfire. They do not rely on inferences for sequence. They lean on artifacts, wound trajectories matched to vehicle penetrations, casings measured against fixed points, and the lab's glass composition linking cabin fragments to the windshield. In domestic violence crime, hard corroboration protects the narrative from later reinterpretation. Interagency roles are defined early. Clark County Sheriff's Office leads homicide investigation and scene management. Vancouver Public Schools preserves video, maps camera clocks to a reference time, and supplies a written chain for custodians who exported the files. The Clark County prosecuting attorney coordinates the statement of probable cause, drafts the information, and manages victim rights notices. The Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory handles ballistics, trace, and glass composition, and provides a lab-to-scene crosswalk so the autopsy and vehicle mapping stay synchronized. Where the earlier gun purchase denial appears, ATF NICS denial records are confirmed through the dealer and state partners. If the handgun was recovered, an e-trace is requested to establish its retail chain. None of this is speculative. It is the standard posture when filings or media reporting describe denial paperwork and recovered projectiles. Search authority continues even when the offender will not face trial. Detectives secure warrants on the residence, vehicle, and digital accounts to preserve the record. Any spent boxes of ammunition, packaging for consumer trackers, installation tools, purchase receipts, or draft messages that speak to intent. These steps are not academic. They protect the historical file, inform civil remedies, and honor public records obligations. When the subject is deceased, warrants shift to evidence of a crime framing rather than fruits and instrumentalities held by a defendant. But the inventory discipline is the same. Sealed bags, item numbers, initials, dates, coordination with victim service providers remains central. Advocates ensure next-of-kin notification, facilitate property release decisions, and lock in safety planning for witnesses touched by the shooting. That work has evidentiary relevance only where statements were taken. Otherwise, it stays rightly outside the charging narrative. The school district receives a parallel briefing to address trauma responses for families and staff who were present during dismissal. In towns like Hazel Dell and Vancouver, the balance between accountability and community care is not optional, it's operational. Had this file gone to arraignment, the prosecutor's bail memo would have cited the earlier hearing where $2 million was requested and $250,000 was set, arguing that lethality indicators were present for weeks. The memo would have sought detention or highest conditions, firearm surrender, monitoring, and proximity alert technology if authorized by statute. The difference now is historical. The offender did not reach arraignment. According to police reports and media accounts, the pursuit ended quickly that same afternoon, and the offender died, closing the criminal court path. Interagency review does not stop there. After-action meetings examine timing, warnings, and technology. Could a GPS-linked victim alert, had it been ordered, have changed the response within minutes? Did the preservation letters go out fast enough? Were carrier and camera offsets documented so that future cases can replicate the speed without error? Those are not rhetorical questions for a report. They are practice notes for the next file that needs to move as fast as a person in danger. The chapter keeps to what the record can prove and how agencies proved it. No retelling of the lot, no second discovery, no invented motive, just elements, enhancements, and the roles that make them hold. Next, the lens shifts to pretrial posture, not as a rehearsal for a hearing that never came, but to document what statements, suppressions, and admissibility rulings would have governed, and how victim rights provisions operate when a domestic violence homicide ends without a defendant in custody. With evidence secured and charging theory complete, the file was ready for court. Prosecutors had strong exhibits: the valid protection order, prior stalking behavior tied to the GPS tracker, the failed rifle purchase, camera footage time-aligned to dispatch, phone sector records, and autopsy findings consistent with the handgun used. Defense challenges would likely have targeted the tracker and digital records, but the chain of custody was intact. Bail had been set at $250,000 despite prosecutors asking for $2 million in GPS alerts. That decision became central in later reviews. Any trial would have focused on premeditation through procurement, movement, and violation of the protection order, but no trial followed. According to police reports and contemporaneous media, Keeland Hill died from a self-inflicted wound the same day. The docket closed, leaving the homicide of Tiffany Hill without courtroom resolution. The aftermath carried weight. Washington enacted the Tiffany Hill Act, expanding GPS monitoring and victim notification in domestic violence cases. It was a direct policy response, turning tragedy into reform. As I close this story, I can't help but reflect on how Tiffany Hill's tragedy reshaped the law and reminded us that ignoring the early warning signs of domestic violence can be deadly. Her name now carries a law meant to protect others, but the cost was unbearably high. No one should ever feel unsafe in their own community, yet this crime proved how fragile those protections can be. What do you think? Are we doing enough to keep families safe, or is there still more to fight for? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from, and if you disagree, tell me why. And if you want more real true crime stories that reveal hard lessons and inspire change, please hit subscribe so you won't miss what comes next.